Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto and Sakura fell in love and defended the Sannin? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Stupid arrow Sannin, Naruto grumbled as he wiped sweat out of his eyes. His on-again, off-again teacher had disappeared after giving Naruto a complicated regimen of chakra control techniques to practice on. Over the years Naruto's control had slowly developed to the point where he now felt like he could control his power as well as the aging Sannin master himself, though Jiraiya would never admit it. Indeed, from what Naruto could tell, these new exercises mainly burned through chakra rather than refining his ability to channel it. Not that he had run out of chakra in a long time. Even without the aid of his demonic prisoner, Naruto's natural reserves had increased under the influence of heavy training and years of desperate combat. It had been a matter of getting strong or dying, and Naruto was still very much alive. Naruto's intuition, honed by his ninja talents, flickered for a second as someone approached in a manner they probably considered stealthy. "Oi, Arrow Sannin, are you done peeping yet? When are we going back to Konoha?" Naruto asked without turning his head or interrupting his concentration on the training technique he was currently engaged in. He appreciated the need to train away from the village from time to time, especially as such journeys dovetailed nicely with the need to conduct espionage against their myriad of enemies, but he was really starting to miss the many individuals he considered precious. Two man-sized frogs wielding long weapons that resembled swords with sickles on the end leapt out of the underbrush from opposite sides and attacked Naruto at the same time. Naruto deflected the blades with the metal strips that covered his forearms. He had taken to wearing the vertical strips of sharpened steel for just such an occasion. Having little talent in advanced weapons beyond standard issue kunai and shuriken, which could handle a sword in a pinch, but were decidedly inferior toward the purpose than simply using his arms. He had also made sure that he could channel chakra into the narrow blades, since any weapon that allowed the user to do the same would still cut through metal that wasn't chakra reinforced. Naruto was in no mood to lose an arm even if he suspected his prisoner might be able to regenerate it. "Hey, Arrow Sannin, if you wanted to spar you could have just asked," Naruto said cheerfully as he continued to dodge and parry blows. Jiraiya burst out of the thick forest growth only a few dozen paces away from him atop one of his characteristic frogs. "This isn't a spar, Naruto," Jiraiya said coolly. His frog opened its mouth and unleashed a torrent of bullet-like attacks with its long tongue. The heavy metal balls embedded in the tongue ensured that a hit would be like getting punched with a superhumanly strong metal fist. "You've learned everything you can from me. Now, my stupid apprentice, you will either pass my final test by defeating me or die trying." "You'd really kill me?" Naruto asked as he formed a seal and slammed an open palm under the defense of one of the melee frogs. He rolled through the puff of smoke that the defeated creature left behind and inhaled deeply, molding chakra all the while. Of course, Jiraiya roared as he too formed seals and inhaled, "Now die." Naruto pushed in on his chest and spat out a rapid series of sticky mud balls as he ran to the side toward the other melee frog. Jiraiya had expected them to come at him, but instead they plastered the hapless frog to the ground. Jiraiya, who had been tracking Naruto, wasn't quick enough to stop his attack of searing flame. The other frog disappeared in a burst of smoke just like the other one. The smoke hadn't even begun to disperse before more balls of muck rained down around Jiraiya and incapacitated his mount. Jiraiya bit his thumb to get some needed blood for a new summon. "Kuchio's no jutsu," he yelled, his palm slamming down onto the ground. There was a massive burst of white smoke that parted to reveal Jiraiya atop the legendary Gamabunta, Lord of all Frogs. "No fair, Arrow Sannin," Naruto whined from his perch atop one of the surrounding forest's many trees. No matter how hard he tried, he was still having trouble coming at his longtime friend seriously. You know I can't summon a frog to help me now because none of them will fight against the frog boss. Yeah, and you're several decades younger than me. Life isn't fair, Jiraiya muttered, slightly angry with himself for not coming at Naruto as hard as he could. The kid had even started to exaggerate his old personality, and now Jiraiya couldn't help but start to feel nostalgic. Besides, Jiraiya yelled, I gave you a chance to summon him in the beginning, didn't I? Jiraiya. Gamabunta rumbled irritably as he puffed on his pipe. Why did you bring me here just to spar with that loud kid? This isn't a spar, Bunta-sama, Jiraiya explained. Naruto is our target for elimination. Oh, Gamabunta replied curiously. Is it already time for that? He's just as interesting as he was all those years ago. Crap, Naruto thought to himself as he surveyed the scene in front of him. Even Jiraiya would be hard-pressed to fight against Gamabunta were the situation reversed. He formed a series of hand seals. No time to reminisce right now, Jiraiya said urgently. Don't tell me my business, Gamabunta grumbled as he leapt into the air. The trees around him whipped violently in the sudden windstorm the giant frog's movements caused. The spot that he had just vacated was already swirling under the influence of an earth technique. A moment longer and Jiraiya's big friend might have been in serious trouble. I need water and oil, Jiraiya said as they reached the apex of their jump. Below them, Jiraiya could feel Naruto preparing his next move. Naruto knew he was in trouble when Gamabunta swelled up sharply and began spraying a fluid that he assumed was oil. However, as soon as the concoction was ignited, Naruto realized his mistake. A giant cloud of superheated steam billowed down on the forest, boiling alive everything in its path. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as his hands flew through a series of seals before the oncoming cloud rushed over him and obscured everything from view. He's still alive, Gamabunta said. The ground shook from the force of his return to the earth. Of course he is, Jiraiya said, scandalized at the notion that any student of his could die so easily. Are you underestimating me? I'm not sure that's possible, Gamabunta replied sarcastically. There, tongue, Jiraiya commanded, pointing at a suspicious shape he could distinguish against the rest of the ruined landscape. There was a crash of rock being ground down to gravel by the power of Gamabunta's attack. Chakra seemed to erupt from everywhere around them. Bunta-sama, Jiraiya yelled. He kicked the frog boss's head in the direction he wanted to go. You must have a death wish, Jiraiya. Gamabunta said dangerously, but his ire vanished when he saw the sharp earthen spikes that had erupted from the ground all around the position he had vacated. If Jiraiya hadn't spurred him to motion when he did, Gamabunta would have been skewered from all sides by the technique. Gamabunta let out a painful sounding oomph as a fist of chakra-enhanced air slammed into his side unexpectedly. He leapt away, but another tendril of air, molded heavily with chakra, snagged one webbed hind leg and sent him sprawling. Jiraiya glanced around, but the air was still heavy with fog from his earlier attack. Enough, he declared. Jiraiya slammed his hands together and used his chakra to manifest a mighty gust of wind that blew the battlefield clear. You know why I didn't even try to summon Gamabunta? Naruto asked as his position was uncovered by Jiraiya's technique. In a situation like this, he's just a big target. Hey, take that back. Gamabunta was cut off in mid-complaint as the earth erupted around him in scaly stone-colored coils. Naruto's long snake-like earth dragon nearly wrapped itself around Gamabunta before he leapt away again. However, the danger posed by Naruto's technique didn't end there. The dragon opened its mouth and spat out large dagger-like shards of stone. Gamabunta tried to leap high into the air, but there were too many projectiles preventing him. He realized that if he were to jump, his movements would become too predictable and Naruto's attacks would be able to strike him. Unfortunately, staying close to the ground proved to have its own set of perils. The coils of Earth Dragon seemed to sprout out of the ground limitlessly as the chakra-created monster tried to wrap itself around the frog boss. Gotcha, Naruto said, his hands moving rapidly again. As the coils of the dragon settled down on the frog boss, he unleashed his earlier technique again. Jiraiya tried to save his summon and even managed to shatter the Earth Dragon, but it was already too late. Gamabunta grunted as several earthen spikes penetrated his thick hide. Jiraiya, Gamabunta said thickly, you'd better prepare yourself for the next time we meet, even if this was for a good cause. Jiraiya knew that Gamabunta would be angry with him while now inside as the injured frog disappeared in cloud of smoke. Still, he had accomplished his purpose of forcing Naruto to use up a great deal of chakra with 3 big-ticket ninjutsu moves. Still, he too had suffered from chakra loss, not only from the initial summoning of Gamabunta, but also from the substantial chakra it had taken to destroy Naruto's Earth Dragon during Jiraiya's failed attempt to keep his summon in the battle. Jiraiya's hair lengthened and hardened into a cocoon around his body as his ninja intuition saved him from a surprise attack from behind. Explosive tags attached to the kunai still sent Jiraiya flying though, even as his technique saved him from injury. He couldn't help it now. If he wanted this to work, he was absolutely going to have to get serious. Naruto glanced around, surprised that his tags hadn't managed to do more than they had against Jiraiya's defense. He knew how to use his hair in such a manner too, but he wasn't confident of his ability to repel a dozen of the most powerful explosive tags with just that technique alone. Now the perverted Sannin was nowhere in sight and Naruto was beginning to get apprehensive that some kind of innovative attack was being prepared for him. The earth shattered beneath his feet and Jiraiya sprung out of the ground in a mess of swirling white hair. The strands were razor sharp and even as quickly as Naruto responded, he could still feel some warm wet liquid dripping down his face from a scalp injury. Jiraiya thrust forward with 2 chakra-charged fingers that would have plunged through Naruto's heart had he not twisted away at the last moment and thrown up a hasty defensive screen of taijutsu moves. No finesse, Jiraiya breathed as he redoubled his onslaught. No reprieve, but you'd better not make me regret teaching you, idiot apprentice. Naruto was shocked by the haunted look on Jiraiya's face as his mentor lashed out furiously at him. It was like he wasn't even talking to Naruto at all. It was almost as if he were repeating a conversation between 2 other people that he merely witnessed. What are you babbling about, Sannin? Naruto asked. He put on his most innocent pout as he delivered a bone-cracking chakra-enhanced blow to his aged opponent's ribs. He thought about all the people back in Konoha who were counting on him. All the important people he had sworn to protect. All the injustices that only someone greater than the Hokages would even attempt to correct. I can't stop here. I don't understand your test, but I will surpass it. Naruto delivered another set of jabs to Jiraiya's midriff when suddenly a ripple in his perceptions caught him up short. Leaving himself vulnerable to attack, he spun to the right and thrust his fist into midair where it ran up against something solid. Before he could correct his stance though, the visible Jiraiya delivered a stout blow to Naruto's side and then melted into dark ooze. Genjutsu, Naruto wheezed as he leapt backwards to get clear of the immediate danger. He formed a seal and poured chakra into breaking the effects of the ongoing assault on his mind. Jiraiya watched Naruto warily as he circled him looking for a weakness. He wasn't the best genjutsu user of all time. His specialty was in resisting them, twisting them against their user, and recognizing when they were being used. Finally he decided that it was now or never. Even Naruto would quickly tear down any illusion that he might employ. Jiraiya's hands flew through a series of seals that ended with rock-hard earthen projectiles carving themselves out of the soil all around Naruto's location. With a final burst of energy, the chakra molded into the impromptu kunai propelled them into Naruto. In a flash he was impaled all over his body so that he resembled a strange blonde hedgehog. Jiraiya staggered and the ground beneath him cracked from the force of Naruto's retaliation. There was a puff of smoke and Jiraiya realized that he had been fooled. The Naruto that he had attacked had only been a shadow clone. Jiraiya's hair spread out to shield him from the attack and he molded chakra into a spin to create a counter wind to repel the dense air Naruto was trying to crush him with. Freed from the grip of Naruto's technique, Jiraiya reacquired the brat's location and inhaled deeply, molding chakra into his breath for a series of air attacks of his own. Naruto flickered and reappeared back on the ground, also swelling up for an elemental attack. Jiraiya barely had time to spit fire to vaporize the incoming shots of water that Naruto was expelling toward him. Idiot apprentice, Jiraiya muttered to himself. At this rate I'll wear you down and you know it. Naruto struggled to catch his breath as he swallowed his last soldier pill. Like any medicine, the soldier pill had limits and Naruto had just reached them. Sure, they could replenish a portion of one's chakra, but if a person were to consume too many too rapidly, then they would burn out their chakra coils. From this point on, Naruto was restricted to how much he could generate on his own, and thanks to Jiraiya's training exercises from earlier, he hadn't been anywhere near his full levels for the entire battle. Naruto saw Jiraiya flash through another series of seals and faltered at what to do. Rushing in could be incredibly dangerous at this point, but if he didn't do something to end the match in his favor, he was seriously going to die. Jiraiya had made it clear, for some reason known only to him, that the end of training with a Sannin appeared to be a life or death test. Naruto took a couple of hesitant steps forward and felt the ground slick over beneath his feet. Even enhanced traction provided by chakra couldn't prevail against the impossibly friction-free surface of ice that Jiraiya had produced. Immediately, a hail of deadly shards rained down on Naruto from all sides to take advantage of his temporary unsteadiness. Naruto concentrated his chakra and two seals hidden beneath his clothes, one on each upper arm, flared up. Seemingly out of nowhere, a dense white-colored membranous shield of chakra materialized to form two elongated halves that, when combined, could form a protective cocoon around his body. The ice shattered against his shield and before Jiraiya could react, Naruto was on the attack again. The shields now served as weapons, with each half of the curved lens-shaped objects gouging out great chunks of ground wherever they missed Jiraiya. Rasengan! Jiraiya shouted as he delivered two swirling maelstroms of chakra into Naruto's crossed shields. While calling out the attack wasn't necessary, Jiraiya knew that sometimes an auditory cue helped focus the mind and as such made a difficult technique easier to pull off. Two Rasengan crunched through Naruto's chakra shields with only moderate difficulty, but the time it took was all he needed to escape being caught up in the devastating attack. Kuchio's no jutsu, Naruto yelled unexpectedly. Jiraiya cursed and leapt back, expecting to see a huge frog appear before him. Instead, what he saw could only be described as bizarre. Two frogs had attached itself to Naruto's back. One of the frog's head was sitting atop his like a grotesque hat, and the other was situated in the opposite direction with its head dangling off his backside like a flabby cape. Both frogs opened their mouths and unleashed their tongues, which wrapped tightly around Naruto's legs. Jiraiya didn't have time to wonder what Naruto was trying to do when the purpose of the strange technique was demonstrated. Using the powerful muscles of the frog's tongues, Naruto was able to propel himself to even greater speeds than normal. Jiraiya was suddenly on the receiving end of extremely powerful kicks from a Naruto moving so fast that he seemed to be in several places at once. Got you! Naruto crowed as he appeared directly behind Jiraiya. He raised his leg high in the air to deliver a decisive blow to the old Sannin's exposed back when two large ghastly-looking hands reached out of nowhere and punched him. The force of the blow sent Naruto rolling end over end until he crashed into an exposed slab of rock that was left over from an earlier earth technique. It's been a long time since someone forced me to use demon hands, Jiraiya said, exhaustion beginning to creep into his voice. Kuchio's no jutsu, Naruto yelled again as he regained his feet. Two more frogs appeared in a similar configuration to the first two except that these were attached to the front of his body. Their tongues lashed out and wrapped themselves around Naruto's arms with the same effect as the first two. Idiot apprentice, Jiraiya laughed as he flickered into position behind Naruto. With those things clinging to you, how do you even expect to see your opponent? It's easy, Naruto replied. Jiraiya flinched as he looked into the eyes of the frog clinging to Naruto's back. Instead of a normal frog's eyes, these eyes were a deep color of blue. Quicker than he could react, both frogs loosed their hind legs from around Naruto's torso and kicked Jiraiya squarely in the chest. You're not the only one who can ask the frogs for new techniques, you know. Unlike you, I asked some of the smaller ones too. You're too obsessed with the big frog bosses, Jiraiya. Jiraiya grinned and wiped off a trickle of blood that was coming from his mouth. Well done, boy, but don't get, he said. He moved his hands in a series of seals again. However, before he could get the technique off, Naruto let loose with an attack using one of his frog's tongues. With them wrapped around his arms, Jiraiya never expected for them to be able to elongate out enough to hit him, but hit him they did, and with a blow far beyond that of what he would expect from such a young frog. Those frogs, he wheezed as he fell to one knee, you're feeding them your chakra, aren't you? Exactly, Naruto said as he flicked away and appeared next to Jiraiya. Now the battle was trending in the opposite direction, with Naruto's frog-enhanced taijutsu dominating Jiraiya's waning technique. Naruto saw an opening and slipped a blow into his old master's side, but as soon as it hit, Jiraiya slipped in under his defenses and bashed one of his frogs to smoke. With symmetry destroyed, Naruto's body was sent spiraling away from the toad Sannin and caused the rest of his frogs to be dispelled. Jiraiya smiled at having broken his student's offensive enhancements, but that smugness was short-lived when he saw a tag affixed to his side. He was barely able to channel enough chakra to survive the blast when his body was bowled over by the explosive seal Naruto had slipped onto him. He used the momentum of the explosion to dodge Naruto's flurry of kunai, but there wasn't much left he could do with the injuries he had endured. Jiraiya pushed himself into an upright position out of sheer willpower and channeled his remaining chakra into a swirling sphere just in time to counter Naruto's own finishing Rasengan. Naruto's technique overpowered Jiraiya's in the end, the force of it cracking the ground beneath him, but stopping short of killing him. It's over, arrow Sannin, Naruto said. He threw two shuriken and used his chakra to guide them so that they wrapped Jiraiya securely in strong metal wire that had been attached beforehand. Now can you explain what this is all about? Jiraiya groaned, but he was smiling. Sure, but can you release me first? This is terribly uncomfortable, you know. I don't know, Naruto said cheekily. It might be a trick after that whole win or die speech you gave me earlier. Sorry, that's the traditional speech, Jiraiya said. I promise, no more tests from me, you pass. All right, Naruto yelled happily. Now please, hurry, Jiraiya said. It's embarrassing. What if someone saw me, the legendary Toad Hermit, sitting here trussed up like this? A moment later, Jiraiya was standing back up thanks to what limited medical treatment Naruto was capable of in his own endurance. He pulled out a scroll and tossed it to Naruto. What's this for? Naruto asked suspiciously. Last time he had seen something like this, it had ended up in him getting tossed off a cliff. It's a contract scroll, of course, Jiraiya said. But this scroll is something that only a couple of people get to see in the course of several generations usually. I thought I could only have one contract. Naruto said. It isn't a contract for summoning, Jiraiya explained. This is a contract with Konoha that was created by the first Hokage. Now that you've beaten me, you can safely sign it and accept your new title. A title? Naruto repeated, now quite confused. Right. This contract is very dangerous, Naruto, since it measures if one is qualified to sign it. If you weren't, then it would kill you, Jiraiya said. That's what the test was for, to see if you had enough power to be worthy of the title. And if I had have failed? Naruto asked. Then I would have had to kill you, Jiraiya admitted. Then upon seeing Naruto's face, he hastily grinned and waved his hands frantically. Not that there was ever a chance of that. I knew you could do it, and it's done now, so don't worry about it. It had better be worth it, Naruto grumbled. Of course it is, Jiraiya said indignantly. Unroll it and sign your name just like you did with the frog contract. Naruto did as he was instructed as Jiraiya explained what benefits would be bestowed upon him now. You'll be able to leave the village as you see fit without being declared a missing nin. Even the council and the Hokage can't command you directly, just ask for your cooperation. I really like that one. Jiraiya, Naruto said softly as soon as he had finished affixing his signature. The aging Sannin was shocked to hear his former apprentice use his name for a chance. Your signature is here too, so is Tsunoade Ba-chan's, and even Orochimaru's. That's right, Naruto-kun, Jiraiya said smugly. Let me be the first to congratulate you, the fourth living holder of the title of legendary Sannin of Konoha. Good morning, Sakura-san, Shizune said cheerfully to the pink-haired young lady as she entered the Hokage's office early in the morning. Haruno Sakura smiled back and continued on her way to the small side office where she normally spent most of her day attending to her duties, whether they be training or assisting with Tsunade's medical programs. Before she disappeared through the door, she glanced over at where Tsunade was standing, in front of the large windows overlooking the village. Her stomach twisted slightly, uncomfortable at the way her sensei had been acting for the last few days. It had all started late one afternoon when a frog had appeared bearing a large scroll, presumably from Jiraiya. Sakura had tried to get her to explain about what was going on, but beyond saying that everything was fine, Tsunade hadn't elaborated further. She had also quickly hidden the scroll. Sakura didn't like unsolved puzzles, but no matter how she considered it, she couldn't unravel what significance the scroll could possibly have. It was far too large to be a communication, and it looked a bit like a contract scroll for a summoning. Unfortunately, she didn't see how that was possible either, since it seemed unlikely that a summoning scroll would cause Tsunade so much disconcertment. Not that the undiscerning eye would have noticed it, but Sakura had spent a great deal of time with Tsunade over the years. Ever since she got that scroll, the Hokage's smile had seemed false and her posture tense whenever she was near her apprentice. With a sigh, Sakura shut the door behind her and started moving papers off of her small desk so that she would have some room to work with. Before she had even managed to sit down, the door burst open and Tsunade bustled in holding a small tray with tea and cakes. I'm sorry I didn't notice you a minute ago, Sakura-san, Tsunade said cheerfully. I brought you something to make up for it. Now Sakura's suspicions flared off the charts. Tsunade was routinely harsh, loud, and lazy. She had never, ever, played serving girl just to make up for a social slight before. Sending Shizune would have been believable, but coming personally was just out of the question. Then there was the fact that her mentor seemed to be in some kind of barely perceptible inner turmoil too. How unexpected, Tsunade-sama, Sakura said hesitantly. Thank you so much. Well, don't just stand there. I can be nice too, you know, Tsunade replied loftily. Right, Sakura replied politely. She picked up the tea and turned herself away from Tsunade slightly. Her mentor had given her pop quizzes in the past, though never by trying to poison her directly, but it was possible that this was something like that. No sooner than Sakura had begun molding her chakra in an attempt to detect any tampering with the drink than she felt a sharp pain in her side. Her head wrenched around sharply to take in an unfathomable scene. The pain intensified, followed by the warm wet feeling of gushing blood, as Sakura looked at the knife Tsunade had plunged to the hilt in her side. So careless, Tsunade said. Sakura-chan, Tsunade-sama, what is this? Shizune yelled from the door, having heard the commotion. She had come running and now dumbfounded at what was going on. Stay back, Shizune-chan, this doesn't concern you, Tsunade said coldly. I won't let you get away with your plot, Sakura. Wah! Sakura tried to speak, but before she could finish, one of Tsunade's chakra-charged blows sent her crashing through the wall of the Hokage Tower, propelling her all the way across the street where she crashed through the wall of another building. Tsunade-sama, stop this madness, Shizune yelled as the older lady took a running jump through the hole Sakura's exit had made. Still, she could only stand rooted to the spot as the blonde rushed toward the damage caused by the pink-haired girl's landing. Sakura moaned as she tried to stand up and realized that her legs had been pinned down from some falling support beams that had once held up the structure her impact had just annihilated. Chakra rushed into her limbs as she kicked the debris off and stood unsteadily to her feet. To make matters worse, the fall had pushed the dagger, which was still lodged in her side, even deeper into her guts. With a squelching noise, she pulled the weapon free and then applied liberal amounts of healing chakra to repair the damage. For now, she would just be satisfied with repairing the tissue damage and halting the bleeding, but as soon as possible she knew that she would have to treat herself for septic poisoning, among other infectious possibilities. Tsunade had known precisely where to stab her for the most injurious effects possible based on how they had been standing relative to each other at the time. There was a thunderous crash and the rubble around Sakura seemed to vaporize itself in a flash of brilliant heat. Sakura channeled chakra throughout her body to enable her to survive the intense pressure that the destructive wave caused as it carved out an enormous crater around her position. Tsunade-sama, this is some kind of mistake, Sakura protested as her sensei plowed through the smoke that was choking off visibility almost entirely and proceeded to deliver a barrage of powerful blows. Did you think you could get away with it? Tsunade asked, oblivious to Sakura's protests. I've known about your designs since the beginning, but I had hoped you could be useful to Konoha anyway. Tsunade, Sakura pleaded as she slipped a punch through that sent the elderly blonde staggering back a few steps. I don't know what you're talking about. But now, Tsunade continued as if Sakura hadn't even spoken, I see that my experiment has come to naught. As Hokage, I will now make sure that none of the medical secrets I pioneered will ever fall into Orochimaru's hands. That's crazy, Sakura protested angrily. I would never betray Konoha to that snake. You're not fooling anyone, Tsunade retorted. I know all about your past, remember? You already offered to betray Konoha before and now you're just waiting for an opportunity to defect for that Uchiha brat. You're wrong, Sakura said tersely. I want to save Sasuke, not defect to Orochimaru. Tsunade stomped down abruptly, causing the earth to shiver and her foot to disappear into the ground thigh-deep. With a massive surge of chakra-enhanced muscles, Sakura found a giant chunk of earth being dug out of the ground and kicked toward her with one sweeping move of Tsunade's leg. She realized with a start that if they stayed where they were, the center of Konoha would swiftly be reduced to a wreck. If you want to stop me so badly, then you'll have to catch me, Sakura yelled. She flickered away, appearing on top of a nearby building. Without waiting to see Tsunade leaping after her, she ran as swiftly as she could toward the nearest training ground. Are you done yet? Tsunade asked once they had arrived after an uneventful pursuit. Or are you hoping you can run all the way to the other traders? Sakura turned around slowly, her face an unreadable mask of scowling hard lines. She squelched ruthlessly the hurt feelings caused by her mentor's harsh words. You've grown considerably since the last attempt, Tsunade continued. You're finally valuable enough that Orochimaru and his protege will welcome you with open arms. Unfortunately, I can't allow that kind of talent to fall into the enemy's hands, Sakura-chan. I told you already, I want to save Sasuke, not join him, Sakura replied. Just like Naruto-kun, or has he become a defector in the waiting too? You of all people should know that I would never join Orochimaru, no matter what. Sakura cracked her knuckles slowly, one at a time as she advanced on Tsunade's position. Perhaps you believe that I'm still the weepy girl that was choking back her sorrow just so she could be your apprentice. Perhaps you're still thinking that you should hold against me those words that I told you I once said in my delusion and hope. If that's what you think, Tsunade-sama, then I'll just have to beat some sense into you until you acknowledge I'm not that person anymore. Tsunade suppressed what would have been a proud smile and charged, her heels gouging out holes in the turf so heavy were her steps. Sakura went into a slight crouch to lower her center of balance and winced in pain from the incompletely healed wound in her side. Chakra swirled around Tsunade's arm as she attempted to punch Sakura's midriff, but instead of yielding flesh, her fist collided with another chakra-reinforced blow. For a split second, master and apprentice were connected, fist squarely against fist, until the energies of their attacks sent them careening away from each other. Tsunade picked herself out of a shallow trench that she had created by skidding along the ground and noticed that Sakura was doing the same. Her hand dipped down to her right thigh for a quick healing technique to repair the muscles that Sakura had unexpectedly severed in the midst of Tsunade's last attack. Likewise, Sakura was healing the surgical cut that Tsunade had inflicted on her left arm. Without waiting for Sakura to finish, Tsunade slammed her hands down into the ground and pulled out a large chunk of rock, which she threw at the pink-haired girl. Sakura responded by punching her way through the projectile, but that proved to be a mistake as the ground beneath her ruptured on each side. Twin slabs of bedrock, under the combined influence of Tsunade's chakra and monstrous strength, slammed together, sandwiching the girl between them. The aging Hokage leapt high into the air, intending to bring down her leg with a decisive drop kick technique when the stones obscuring Sakura split into dozens of tiny chunks and fell away. Tsunade noticed the straight edges of the gravel remaining from Sakura's escape and clapped her hands together in a difficult wind technique to escape her prior trajectory. It was well that she did so, for as soon as she touched down, Sakura set upon her with invisibly thin scalpel-like blades of chakra emanating from her fingers. From a pace of over 10 meters, the two women faced off with the ultimate weapons of supreme chakra control. Sparks erupted in midair as their claws met and scrapped over each other as both tried to skewer the other. Sakura moved her fingers rapidly up and down with her hand held horizontally at chest height. The tips of her long chakra claws exploded against the ground and ripped up gouges repeatedly as Tsunade expertly dodged the nimble attacks. Sakura felt pain lance through her shoulder and realized that Tsunade had changed tactics again. Now the legendary medic was rapidly varying the length of her chakra appendages and using that effect for a flurry of invisible jabbing attacks. Doing the only thing she could think of in such a situation, Sakura somersaulted backwards, out of her teacher's reach. No time was given for Sakura to recover though. Tsunade shortened the reach of her chakra scalpels and charged at Sakura, waiting until the last instant to send all 10 razor-sharp edges rocketing toward her position at the same time. Sakura smirked and leapt straight into the air just as Tsunade's attack plowed into the ground, kicking up a lot of dust. Before the Hokage could retract her tendrils of chakra, Sakura landed on top of them and used chakra pooled in her feet to race back up along the tiny, but strong strands to deliver a devastating kick to Tsunade's head. "Did that jar some sense back into you?" Sakura asked smugly as she landed lightly on her feet. With an angry roar, Tsunade bounced back off the ground, chest heaving, and punched the ground rapidly. Each blow churned up thick clouds of dirt and caused the earth to quake enough that Sakura's balance wobbled. With unexpected speed, Tsunade emerged from the dust and started raining down hammer blows on the relatively tiny pink-haired girl. "Fine," Sakura said to herself as she dug her feet in. "If you want to go at this like a couple of drunken brawlers, then so be it." Shizune and Taunton arrived just in time to see two figures in the midst of a giant cloud of dust and debris begin pounding on each other. Most of the blows being exchanged between the two women were landing on each other, fist against fist, each time with a dull thunderous concussion as excess chakra was dispersed into the surrounding atmosphere. However, some of the blows were getting through, and despite almost inhuman levels of chakra-enhanced durability, both women were becoming increasingly bloodied. Tsunade's hair, normally in lazy pigtails, had come free and was swishing around with each swing of her fists. One of Sakura's eyes was swollen shut, and even though she was still delivering full-powered punches, Shizune was almost certain her right wrist had shattered. At last they broke apart, as if they both realized at the same time that if they didn't pause to heal, their ability to sustain combat would soon be lost. "She's really trying to kill me," Sakura thought to herself as she tried to will her limbs to cease shaking from fatigue. Her chakra levels were rapidly depleting thanks to the healing she was having to do, usually on the same injuries, as Tsunade was directing her attacks to reopen old wounds repeatedly. Each healing of an old wound was less complete than the last, and Sakura knew that the worst injuries, her sight and her wrist, would soon becoming inoperable at this rate. One glance at Tsunade and Sakura's plight seemed even more desperate to Shizune. She was alarmed at how the medical princess of Konoha, so dubbed by Jiraiya, was acting, though she still had faith that it was a just cause. Tsunade had tricked her before, after all, into thinking that she might actually help Orochimaru. At least Shizune had convinced herself that Tsunade had been tricking her all along and had never considered aiding the evil Sannin. Freshly healed again, Tsunade looked as formidable as ever. Her chakra reserves were still so high that it was impossible to tell how much power was left in her aging body. Sakura, on the other hand, had taken a stiff beating, not to mention having to overcome such a grievous wound being inflicted on her by surprise before the real battle had even started. The pink-haired girl had swallowed several pills to replenish chakra, blood, and boost her strength. With a deep breath of relief thanks to the warm soothing effects of her medicine, Sakura cleared her mind and concentrated on her next move. Tsunade was walking slowly toward her, hands flashing in rapid execution of seals as her trademark jacket billowed out behind her. Sakura tried to move, but found herself rooted in place. She channeled vast quantities of chakra into her muscles as she vainly struggled against some unseen force. The world around her went black and still except for the sound of running water all around her. The inky black water started to creep up her legs and panic began to set in, despite her attempts to squelch it. "It's no use, Sakura-chan," a familiar voice said from behind her. Sakura twisted around and came face to face with Naruto, but Naruto unlike any she wanted to imagine. His clothes were tattered and bloody, exposing great festering holes left over from attacks that had punctured through his torso. "Naruto-kun," Sakura said, shocked, even as her mind was yelling at her that this was only a genjutsu. A bloody hand reached out of Naruto's chest, its power jerking the tattered remains of his body in half before tossing him aside. Sasuke's face, covered in a demented expression, stared at her from point-blank range. "Why so sad, Sakura-chan?" He asked lightly. No, it isn't real, Sakura mumbled frantically. Some morbid power forced her to look into Sasuke's eyes. Terror gripped her as she realized that they were not the red patterns of Sharingan, but instead had the appearance of a snake's eye. You failed them all, didn't you? The people you cared about, Orochimaru said with Sasuke's voice. You really are Tsunade's apprentice after all. No, this is wrong, Sakura said, strength creeping back into her voice as she fought the illusion. I'll kill them, I've already killed them, they're going to die because of you, they have died because of you, Orochimaru chanted, his hot breath in Sakura's face. I won't let you, Sakura screamed, her chakra surging enough to shatter the inky black water that had nearly reached her chest by that point. Inner fire seemed to range out of control, threatening to become an outer flame as well. With my own power I will see you burn, Orochimaru. Tsunade watched her twitching apprentice with curiosity even as the powerful technique fought to overcome her mind. Is this really your end, Sakura? She asked herself aloud. No. A voice rumbled from behind, this is your end, child. Impossible, Tsunade said, utterly rattled by the booming voice, which was instantly recognizable thanks to the many descriptions she had heard of it over the years. Kyuubi, you're dead. Not dead, little one, nor imprisoned any longer thanks to that fool you call Jiraiya, Kyuubi said smugly. The idiot pushed Naruto too hard and I managed to escape. Tsunade fought back tears as the demon fox flicked one of its tails and tossed two limp forms down at her feet. The broken, mangled bodies of Naruto and Jiraiya, still steaming from the Kyuubi's fire, but completely dead. I'm going to destroy everything you ever cared about, slowly, as you watch, feeble Hokage, Kyuubi roared maliciously. One of its tails lashed out and to Tsunade's horror obliterated the prone form of Sakura. Next it ravaged Konoha, one section at a time, as countless ninja attacked it only to be killed in the monster's ambient fire. Dan, Tsunade called out longingly as her long-dead boyfriend attacked the demon and perished in a small burst of flame. Abruptly Tsunade whirled and plowed her fist through the air, shattering the illusion around her in a flash as Sakura staggered back holding her stomach. She had seen through the illusion from the start since it was merely her own technique twisted back upon her, but she had played along to get a free shot in against Sakura. How do you like it? Sakura said hotly as she raked Tsunade with elongated scalpels of chakra, having your worst nightmares turned in on you. Tsunade disappeared in a puff of smoke and a small log, cut into pieces, clattered to the ground in her place. She reappeared a short distance away, visibly fatigued, and took a long drink out of a bottle that looked suspiciously like sake. Tossing the bottle aside, she wiped a bit of blood that was trickling down her face from a cut above her eye and slammed her palm into the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu, Tsunade called out. When the smoke cleared, she was standing astride the great slug queen Katsuyu. How can I aid you, Tsunade-sama? Katsuyu asked politely. The enemy is before us, Tsunade said sternly as she pointed to Sakura. Understood, Katsuyu replied. She rapidly expelled several streams of acid toward a bobbing and weaving Sakura who barely managed to evade the lethal assault. There was a flash as Sakura tossed several kunai with smoke bombs attached to mask her movements as she headed toward the nearby tree line. Stay back, Tsunade yelled. Shizune and Taunton, who had wisely stayed far away from the line of fire, had been joined by several Anbu. Their expressions were hidden behind stoic masks, but nonetheless Shizune got the impression that they were reluctant to follow their Hokage's edict. Through the smoke screen left by Sakura, a tree trunk came whizzing out like a missile and embedded itself in Katsuyu's ponderous form. The smoke started to clear as more trees were flung into the slow-moving slug where they penetrated the creature's soft body. Shizune could see Sakura breaking the massive plants off at their base and then hurling them as easily as a person might throw a ball. Katsuyu fragmented into many dozens of tiny slugs and bounded across the ground toward Sakura. Tsunade was lost from sight amongst their numbers and Sakura was quickly surrounded. She had broken off another tree and was now wielding it as a makeshift club. Each swing sent the tiny slugs spinning away, many of them disappearing in a cloud of smoke as they went back to where they came from. As one they all swelled up and let off long thick streams of acid. Sakura tried to dodge, but there were too many. Her skin hissed and boiled as the slugs, acid landed. Then, when they seemed to have finished their most devastating attack, the slugs rushed Sakura, piling on top of her until she was completely obscured from sight. They swelled up again, but this time instead of shooting acid they exploded violently. Shizune was forced to look away from the intense light generated from the blast, but she could feel the wind it produced whipping angrily past her. When the smoke cleared, Sakura was a wreck, barely alive, and in danger of being finished off by Tsunade at any moment, though the blonde Sannin was clearly exhausted and suffering from the onset of chakra depletion too. Sakura reached up with a shaky arm and traced her hand over the jagged broken bone that had pierced through her skin. With a sickening snap she wrenched the errant limb back into place and then through force of will formed a series of hand seals. Tsunade dug into the ground for another oversized piece of earth to smash her apprentice in what would easily be a finishing blow with Sakura in her current state when the pink-haired girl started to glow at 5 different points on her body. Seal forms emerged on her arms, thighs, and midriff, all giving off immense chakra. I've been storing chakra in these seals for a long time thanks to your inspiration Tsunade-sama, Sakura said shakily as the seals began to melt off and rush their power toward her right arm. So, you intend to trade some of your life for a regeneration? Tsunade asked. No, Sakura said flatly. Tsunade's eyes widened slightly in shock that the seals were different than her own technique. Instead of making myself old, Ba-chan, I will simply use the reservoir of chakra to fuel the most powerful healing techniques and restore my body the old-fashioned way. Impudent brat, Tsunade snarled, outraged at being called Ba-chan. Don't you think I tried it that way first? You don't have the power to heal yourself up front without trading off some of your lifespan. This vain mistake will cost you all of your life instead of a mere portion. Sakura smiled faintly, her hand glowing with a healing technique as Tsunade hurled her last attack. For a moment everyone gathered was convinced that the boulder had done its job, but with a dull reverberating crash Sakura pounded the stone to rubble with a single blow. Tsunade, drained of her chakra reserves and out of time to perform another jutsu, held up her hands as Sakura charged. Her arm was covered in dark seal lines as the stored chakra continued to pour into the limb, enhancing her strength by orders of magnitude now that no burdensome healing techniques was draining the influx of power. Am I dead? Tsunade though as she opened her eyes again, not even realizing that she had closed them. Sakura's fist was scarcely an inch away from her nose. Did I pass Tsunade-sama? Sakura asked sweetly. Wah? How did you know? Tsunade asked weakly. Sakura caught her sensei as she sagged over and began administering some badly needed healing techniques. I just had a hunch after the way you'd been acting recently, Sakura said. I was thinking you'd poison me or something, not stab me through the guts and then try to kill me though. Sorry Sakura-chan, Tsunade replied. It was necessary. The final test that a Sannin master must give her apprentice. Final test? Sakura asked. Is that why you had to put me through that genjutsu and make all those accusations? That wasn't a very believable performance by the way. I'm not an actress, Tsunade said crossly. But to answer your question, yes. Each master has to test their apprentice in their own way. I felt that some probing of your emotional state was in order. I understand, Sakura said quietly, lost in thought as the visions came back to her. Tsunade brushed off Sakura's hands and indicated that she was well enough to move on her own again. She wiped off a bit of blood from her clothes and slammed her palm into the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu. A small slug appeared and unrolled its body so that Tsunade could retrieve the scroll that she had seen the frog deliver several days previously. Tsunade carefully unrolled the scroll and sat it in front of Sakura. Hokage-sama, are you all right? An Anbu member asked suddenly. Yes, stay quiet will you? Tsunade replied in an annoyed tone. Shizune had rushed up too, tauntaun in hand, but also remained quiet when she heard the admonishment directed toward the Anbu. What is this? Sakura asked. Why is Naruto-kun's signature here? It's a contract scroll Sakura, Tsunade explained. Only one recognized as a Sannin may sign it safely. Look closer, you can see my name, and Jiraiya's. And Orochimaru's, Sakura thought to herself. Wait a minute, she blurted out. Naruto-kun is a Sannin now. Apparently so, Tsunade said, ignoring the discontent radiating from several of the Anbu. So are you, just as soon as you finish signing. But how? Sakura asked. Sannin, by definition, can only be 3, right? Not exactly, Tsunade said, sighing slightly. 3 is the limit actually, but only per generation. However, there don't have to be 3. In fact, since the founding of Konoha there have only been 2 groups of 3 Sannin from the same generation at any one time. Originally, the Sannin were intended to be an elite group of ninja below the Hokage who would act like support pillars for Konoha's government. Those 3 warriors would stand ready to fill the spot of Hokage should something unexpected happen. Unfortunately, finding enough ninja with the required power was more difficult than Konoha's founders had imagined. So the title has become more than just a numerical description then, Sakura said. Without hesitation she bit her finger and signed her name to the scroll. I'm proud of you, Sakura-sama, Tsunade said warmly. 5th living holder of the title of legendary Sannin of Konoha. In the months following the rise of 2 new Sannin in the hidden village of Konoha, the balance of power amongst the 5 great cage powers tilted once again in favor of the Leaf Shinobi. Konoha had seriously gone on the attack for the first time since the formation of the village and as a result had gained territory from the land of waterfall and grass. The village hidden in the rocks had backed down from its escalation of border wars as it attempted to bring itself more into contact with the land of wind and its weakened village hidden in the sand. The enemy of Konoha, the fallen Sannin Orochimaru, continued to draw men and material from sound and from mercenary allies drawn from the shinobi in waterfall and grass. While no proof was available, numerous uprisings in the foreign lands taken into the custody of the Leaf were believed to be the work of the evil Sannin and his cohorts. It was during these revolts and the lawlessness that they generated that the new Sannin team of Konoha created their legend as they enforced the Hokage's will by defeating forces that would have normally required an entire army of shinobi to contain. Seemingly overnight, the perceptions of vulnerability that had been created in the eyes of the other cage powers as a result of the sand sound invasion of Konoha almost completely evaporated. All opposing shinobi saw was the devastating power that the Leaf wielded against them, though there were many who still licked their wounds in anticipation of another conflict between the Sannin. The terror was especially acute whenever the presence of the rumored demon container was inflicted upon one of Konoha's enemies. However, the fear that the Leaf symbol garnered was edged with the knowledge that a disproportionate amount of Konoha's power remained dependent on a mere 4 individuals, 2 of which were advancing in age. It was from that position of possibly fleeting strength that the 5th Hokage had attempted to reshape the world in Konoha's favor and stretch the influence of the Leaf into the distant future. The extent of her success would only be told with time and all too likely would be counted in bodies. I hope you're happy, Naruto, Jiraiya said with an annoyed tone of voice as they made their way slowly down the broad dirt road that lead to Konoha. I'm going to get pounded by Tsunade Hime thanks to your hobby making us late. Are you still whining about that arrow Sannin? Naruto replied petulantly. You know, not everyone has income from their own line of perverted books. Some of us have to make a living by working for it. If you call collecting bounties on small fry like that working, Jiraiya replied, referring to the missing nin that Naruto had turned over to the rock. Are you talking again, Jiraiya? Sakura asked. Naruto noticed his old teacher's face pale ever so slightly. The sound of her knuckles cracking ominously filled the air. Do I need to remind you that we're late because you decided to do some research at the last two villages? Ah, no, Jiraiya said, rubbing a sore spot on his head. I remember the last time you told me. Naruto grinned triumphantly as the frog hermit slunk back to the end of their three-person line grumbling about how Sakura was only taking his side because he'd split the bounty with her. One of the downside of being a Sannin was that most of their activities didn't bring them a steady salary like their jobs as regular ninja had. Ah, it feels good to be back again, Naruto said as they saw the top of Konoha's high wall finally peeking above the treetops. Sakura shook her head slightly, still amazed even after all this time that Naruto loved the village so much after all the abuse it had repaid him with over the years. They passed through the main gates without so much as a challenge from the two ninja on guard and proceeded to walk directly through the village toward the Hokage's office building. Sakura smiled warmly as she saw many villagers waving and shouting greetings at herself, Jiraiya, and Naruto. Even some of the older villagers, the ones who used to hate him, had come to respect and admire Naruto. Their change of heart had come not only because of his rising to the title of Sannin, but because Naruto had been the tip of Konoha's new spear of military power. Even the people who had always thought of him as the nine-tailed demon had to admit that he had saved many lives in putting down brewing wars before they began by using his abilities to crush the will of Konoha's enemies to fight. Come on, Naruto said energetically, let's go straight on up. Naruto-kun, Sakura called out ineffectively as she watched him go running up the side of the Hokage's headquarters yelling out, Ba-chan, repeatedly. He still has no manners, Jiraiya said as he jumped after him. You should talk, Sakura muttered, following the legendary pervert up the wall. They arrived in Tsunade's office just in time to see two of their ambassadors and a council member on their way out. Surprisingly, Tsunade had caught Naruto up in a large friendly hug instead of bashing him through a wall for calling her old such as she typically did. So, was the mission a success? Tsunade asked once they were all settled down and seated in plush armchairs in front of her desk. Well, we didn't have to fight at the second village, Naruto said. He was sitting lazily, but a trained ninja eye would have recognized that he hadn't really let his guard down. As soon as we appeared, the rebels laid down their arms, Jiraiya said. I think they were expecting assistance from the rock. Well, we won't have to worry about that anymore, Tsunade said. At least for the short term, I hope. The ambassadors were just telling me of their meeting with the rock's representatives. They've signed a renewed treaty of friendship and non-aggression. It isn't as airtight as our alliance with the sand, but it should prevent the rock from attempting anything if our attention needs to be directed elsewhere. It's almost like we were young again, Jiraiya. Yeah, Jiraiya agreed, though his voice didn't sound very enthusiastic. He remembered how Konoha had experienced a small golden age of peace and prosperity thanks to the bloody efforts of himself, Tsunade, and Orochimaru. He was afraid that history would repeat itself at this rate considering the number of immensely powerful opponents that they still faced. Even without the rock, the sound will still be causing problems though, right? Naruto asked. Orochimaru may try to incite uprisings, but he doesn't have the strength to support them directly like the rock was threatening to do, Tsunade said. Besides, there can only be one reason why our old companion hasn't used the body-stealing technique on his apprentice yet, Jiraiya said, referring to the intelligence that they had indicating Orochimaru had taken a new host within the last year or so who wasn't Sasuke. He still needs Sasuke's strength combined with his own to defeat his enemies. We're fortunate that Orochimaru is so fixated on destroying Konoha, Tsunade said thoughtfully. If chaos were truly all he wanted, he could accomplish that by wiping out any of the cage powers, and none of the rest of them are as able to face his kind of threat as we are. If that's what you call fortunate, Ba-chan, Naruto replied, hopping up from his seat. He tossed a scroll on Tsunade's desk and headed for the door. Let us know if you need anything else. Are you coming with me to the Ichiraku, Sakura-chan? Yes, but don't just decide things on your own, Sakura chided him teasingly as she joined him, waving happily to their two old masters who had remained seated. They seemed happy, Tsunade commented casually as soon as they were gone. Frogs and slugs are natural companions, Jiraiya replied, hinting at her. He leaned forward as Tsunade reached for the report that Naruto had left on her desk. Don't you think, Tsunade-hime? I don't know, I've never seen a frog that didn't have a problem with perversion, Tsunade said. For the second time the legendary hermit heard the ominous sound of knuckles cracking with chakra-enhanced strength. Jiraiya-kun. Heh. Jiraiya chuckled nervously. Why don't you read that report? There might be something important. Actually, I just thought of somewhere I need to be. Sorry, Haim, I'll be back after while. Tsunade refrained from laughing as her old teammate scuttled out of the room and turned her attention to Naruto's scroll. 10 days earlier. What's the situation, Naruto? Jiraiya asked. Naruto was sitting idly on a tree branch nearby watching Sakura as she traced seals onto a scroll in preparation for some incomprehensible technique that Tsunade had apparently taught her. I'm still waiting for the last 2 shadow clones to dispel themselves and report in, Naruto replied. It looks like the town is encompassed by pretty heavy defenses though, for non-shinobi anyway. They've also got several ninja keeping watch, but it shouldn't be anything we can't handle. I think most of their ninja are either too young or too old to be a real threat. It might be a trap, Sakura said. They could just be using a transformation to look weaker than they are. Naruto shrugged. It was always possible, but improbable since it would require that their opponents realize he was scouting them. Otherwise, they couldn't hold an exhausting transformation all the time on the off chance of confusing a scout. Is there any approach that won't be spotted? Jiraiya asked, trying to keep the conversation steered towards tactics. No, they've cleared out the forest around their position for a good 500 yards in every direction, Naruto replied. They've even flattened out the terrain and marked it to give their ranged weapons added accuracy. Not that we can't still sneak in anyway. I'm against stealth, Sakura said as she wrapped up her scroll. We want to make a visible example out of their attempt at thwarting Konoha, right? Yeah, but it will be more terrifying for them if we appear unexpectedly in their midst, Jiraiya said. I doubt it would be more terrifying than us demolishing their defenses with powerful techniques, Sakura retorted. What do you think, Naruto? Jiraiya asked. The golden-haired ninja made a slight whining noise at being drawn into such an argument. I agree with Sakura-chan, he replied. Jiraiya started to mutter something about him kissing up when Naruto cut him off with an explanation. We want to minimize casualties, don't we? If we destroy their defenses they might get scared and surrender, but if we appeared suddenly in the middle of the village and started taking people out they might decide to fight like a cornered animal. All right, we'll do this one your way, Sakura-chan, Jiraiya said finally. But I want Naruto to send in some shadow clones to infiltrate the village to stage a diversion from within if we start having any trouble. Just because I have a lot of chakra doesn't mean you need to waste it on every mission we take, Naruto grumbled. It's good for you, boy, Jiraiya said, grinning broadly. You'll thank me one day, just like all my other guaranteed success rate training techniques. You mean like tossing him off of a cliff? Sakura asked sarcastically as she teasingly referred to one of the many stories she had coaxed out of Naruto since they began taking missions together as Sannin. Jiraiya pouted in return, mumbling something about being abused by slugs all his life. Ah, there went the last one, Naruto said, referring to his shadow clone scouts. His hands moved rapidly to form the seals necessary for a handy little technique that allowed him to display the information his clones had gathered about the layout of the land in a three-dimensional sculpture of dust on the ground. The particles of grit swirled together to form houses, walls, and weapon placements in a precise replica of the village they were to attack. It shouldn't be too difficult to demolish these catapults and stockade walls, Jiraiya said as he examined the layout. Well, then I guess the only thing left to do is give them a chance to surrender, Naruto said. The aging Jonin Kazuo, who commanded the shinobi force stationed at the village in question, looked out nervously across the artificially barren landscape surrounding his charge. His village, the grass, had been unwilling to risk a direct confrontation with the powerful Leaf, so he had been sent out to oversee a band of homeless ninja in hopes that the Hokage would overlook such a small village so long as it had a few fangs. He could have told his superiors that such a notion was folly. Unfortunately for this village, it constituted an unacceptable break in the internal lines of communication that Konoha was relying upon when it expanded its border beyond the village's location. Konoha had learned several things from its war with the sand and the sound. The territories that it had been content to allow its neighbors to exercise domain over were suddenly viewed with suspicion as an unacceptable staging ground too close to Konoha proper. The people who had been ignored by the Hidden Leaf had also become instant threats overnight, and not without good reason. The Jonin had no interest in politics, but he was beginning to suspect that a foreign hand was stirring the pot against Konoha under his very nose. To the best of his knowledge, the Hokage had always extended the hand of friendship to the border states, but now peasants who lived near that border rallied with torches and pitchforks at the mere mention of a Leaf shinobi. Sir, we've got 3 individuals approaching from the south, one of his Chunin, a youth named Yuki, called out in warning. Their headbands have the leaf symbol on them, a Jonin named Taro added. Kazuo shook his head at how out of touch Taro was for a man who claimed to be a Jonin. Of course, to be fair, Taro had been retired from active duty until just a little under a month ago. Still, the fame of the 3 individuals approaching their humble village was great enough that he should have recognized them. There were few shinobi in this part of the world, at least those who collected information about opponents they should try to avoid conflict with, who didn't know the Sannin of Konoha on sight. Sir, those 3, they're Konoha's enforcers. Yuki exclaimed nervously as they finally came in close enough for him to recognize them too. Don't call them that, Kazuo replied tersely. Even if they are our opponents, they are great ninja more worthy of respect than to be called mere enforcers. They've come to pillage this village and destroy its heritage of independence, Yuki spat angrily. You've been listening to the villagers too much, Yuki, Taro said softly. Even though our orders are to keep this village out of Konoha's hands, perhaps we can yet avoid a fight. Greetings, villagers at the fork, the ninja Kazuo recognized as Jiraiya called out. You have turned away agents of the Hokage and fortified the lands under Konoha's jurisdiction without leave. Greetings, Sannin of Konoha, Kazuo replied. I am afraid that you are mistaken. This land doesn't reside under the jurisdiction of any shinobi. That might once have been true, but no more, Jiraiya said. Everything from here to the horizon has reverted to the hidden leaf. Defying our patrols and turning away our agents will not be met with restraint during these trying times. Oi, old man, the blonde-haired Sannin called out. It isn't a bad deal, or does grass want its whole territory annexed? Kazuo chuckled to himself as the pink-haired Sannin began berating the complacent relaxed-looking blonde for his lack of tact. He had a point though, not that Kazuo would ever admit it. The leaf hasn't waxed strong enough to subdue the grass without the wolves ripping it apart while its claws are busy elsewhere, Kazuo replied. Besides, we are humble homeless nin hired to protect this village. You have no quarrel with the grass. Yet we must have this strategic territory to defend the heart of our domain, Jiraiya said. He didn't even bother to mention the homeless nin ploy since it was so obvious. Even though he didn't say it, Kazu heard the rest of his statement. If grass stands in Konoha's way, then the leaf be at a serious disadvantage regardless, so it might as well make the grass shinobi suffer for their defiance. Perhaps we can yet reach a solution agreeable to all sides, Kazu said. If we allowed Konoha to patrol this area at will, would you agree to an accord over this disputed zone? You cannot be serious, Commander, Yuki said, hostility oozing out in his tone. Who knows what they might do with their patrols? We've got to stop them here. Hold your tongue, Chunin, Kazu retorted. He directed his attention back to the three standing outside his walls. Please, come in and accept our hospitality. With seemingly little effort, the three famous ninja appeared at his side, relaxed, apparently letting their guard down, though Kazu found that to be highly unlikely. If you'd like, we can draw up a field agreement between myself and the three of you, which will hopefully encourage the grass to mediate the negotiations we spoke of a moment ago, Kazu said, maintaining the front of homeless nin for the sake of saving face. That would be acceptable, so long as Konoha's interest in securing this area is met for now. Jiraiya said. Kazu smiled inwardly as he turned to order one of his subordinates to get a blank scroll. Konoha had a reputation as one of the gentlest shinobi nations, so much so that it sometimes made their enemies forget that beneath that lay a core of iron. He for one remembered the first Sannin and the third, not to mention the fourth, and as such had no desire to fight these people. Double Snake Destroyer, Yuki called out as he appeared unexpectedly. You dogs shouldn't have let your guard down. Kazu whirled around, shocked at the sight of three large deadly snakes bursting through the chest of each Sannin. Even more shocking than the sight of their gory deaths was the technique his Chunin follower had used. There was a pop and a cloud of smoke as the three shadow clones disappeared. You, Kazu said, snapping into action. He grabbed the lapel of Yuki's shirt and shook him violently. What do you think you've done? We could have saved this village from itself if you had been content to sit quietly. There was thunderous crash from the opposite end of the village, and the time for recriminations had ended as quickly as it begun. Kazu gave the signal and his forces dispersed to join in the fight. I thought we were going to get out of this without a battle there for a second, Naruto said as his clones were impaled. Let's do this thing then, Sakura said, her chakra flaring up. All right, but watch out for this one Chunin, Naruto said, describing the shinobi who had destroyed his clones. He was using techniques I've only ever seen from Orochimaru and his students. Maybe we'll finally get a link to the sound, Jiraiya said. He followed Naruto and Sakura as they began to approach the fortifications of the village. A few arrows were being fired along with an occasional shot from the catapults which were stationed at regular intervals. The defenses were mostly geared toward repelling a regular army, though instead of ninja. Naruto's hands quickly moved through a set of seals as he completed an earth technique that called up large spherical boulders from the ground. Sakura picked the large stones out of the bed of chakra they were floating on and tossed them with stunning accuracy toward the catapults. After impact, the boulders fell apart into loose soil as the chakra molded into them dissipated. Within a few seconds, the two of them had demolished almost all of the village's large weapons and knocked several gaping holes in the stockade wall. Naruto and Jiraiya inhaled deeply as a new hail of arrows rained down on them. Twin balls of dispersed fire incinerated the incoming projectiles and created wind currents that disrupted their trajectory. Naruto inhaled a second time and unleashed a thin stream of fire that sliced through the few remaining siege weapons effortlessly. The villagers who had assembled to fire bows and man the catapults scattered before the leisurely approach of Konoha's greatest warriors. Now the remainder of the battle would be decided by shinobi. You should surrender, Jiraiya said as around 20 ninja, mostly Chunin and Jonin, surrounded them. In fact, most of you should retire. I don't want to hear that from you. Taro shouted indignantly. He wasn't that much older than the hermit Sannin. Kazu gestured and the attack was joined, but even though they outnumbered the enemy more than 6-1, he wasn't optimistic. A dozen kunai thudded into Naruto only for his body to melt away into mud a few seconds later as the earth behind his attackers swirled up to reveal his form. He inhaled deeply, molding chakra, and spat out a thick gooey substance that caught up two Chunin in a swiftly hardening straitjacket which effectively put them out of the action. Sakura pulled out a few strands of pink hairs and infused them with chakra until they became stiff needle-like projectiles. 3 enemy ninja fell to the ground, nerves and tendons pierced through to the point where their limbs lost strength or ached with phantom pain. Her stomach swelled out slightly as she built up chakra before she spat out a huge volume of liquid. 2 more of the enemy's ranks fell to the disabling acid that only a slug master could call upon. Jiraiya grinned as his apprentice showed off with the quick and easy techniques he had taught him. Even the pink-haired girl the boy was always pining over had some chakra techniques that were cheap and easy to pull off, yet devastating to weaker ninja like those they were currently fighting. As for him, he was content to knock out his opponents the old-fashioned way with plain simple fists. His share of the opponents had fallen quickly to dozens of hammer blows from an old man that was too fast for them to see, let alone block, when he was moving at his top chakra-enhanced speed. Naruto's fingers gathered chakra in their tips, which burned brightly with a technique, as he closed in on the Jonin commander. The old man tried to stop him, and indeed almost managed to dodge his attacks, but it only took the slightest brush of his fingertips against his stomach to finish the seal. What did you do to me, boy? Kazu asked, coughing sickly as he felt his strength fleeing away. I sealed off your ability to access chakra, Naruto replied smugly. Don't worry though, it's temporary. The seal only held back chakra, but in so doing it degraded itself. Eventually the energy flow would break through like water bursting from a dam. It wouldn't even work at all on those who had too much chakra to begin with. Great. Just great, Sakura said unhappily as she walked over dragging a body behind her. Hey, isn't that the guy who used the snakes? Jiraiya asked. I thought we were going to be careful not to kill him. Yeah, well, we didn't kill him, Sakura said, pointing to the now limp hairs that were embedded in his tendons. He poisoned himself with something pretty exotic. I hope you don't mind, old man, Naruto said cheekily to the Jonin commander, but we're going to be taking this guy with us for study. We're not going to do any more damage than we've already done, Jiraiya said. But if we have to come back here again, there won't be anything left of this town, understand? Kazu said nothing, knowing that his team would probably be recalled after this and the villagers wouldn't dare risk defying Konoha again. At least, he hoped they wouldn't, because after the incident with Yuki he had a feeling that the evil Sannin of legend, the rumored immortal Orochimaru, had set this conflict in motion. His report would be sure to mention to his superiors that they risked being played by a common enemy if they continued to resist the leaf. Present time. Tsunade put down the scroll, finding Naruto's insights and interrogation of the prisoners most illuminating. There was even a little map on the last few inches of scroll indicating the villages they had sacked, what they had done there, and when the action had occurred. She leaned back and reached for her sake. "Oi, old man, we're starving," Naruto said happily as he took his seat next to Sakura at the Ichiraku ramen stand. He was in a particularly good mood as a result of all the well wishes and congratulations on another mission well done from the villagers as he walked down the street. "Naruto-sama, my favorite customer," Tsuki replied, grinning. It had been quite a long time since he'd seen either of them. "And of course you too, Sakura-sama. It's nice to see you again too, Tsuki-san," Sakura replied politely. She was in less of a good mood than Naruto. Though she was overjoyed that he had finally gained a measure of respect and status in the eyes of the villagers, she didn't appreciate some of the attention he garnered these days. "So how long are you back for this time?" Ayame asked as she placed bowls in front of them. "As long as we want to," Naruto said cheekily. "We'll probably have to leave on another mission in a week or two," Sakura said. "But who knows, if these rebellions stop we might not need to." "I never thought I'd see the day when Konoha had to be putting down revolts inside its own territory," Tsuki said solemnly. "I guess it's just human nature. No matter how benevolent the Hokages have been for all these years, everyone is still eager to hate us for our prosperity and influence. There will be time to repair our relations with the other nations once Orochimaru is defeated," Naruto said simply. Tsuki just nodded, and from there the conversation steered away from business to more jovial topics. Tsuki told them about how several students in the academy liked to visit his stand to hear stories about what the Toad Master Sannin was like back when he ate his every meal at the humble little stand. "Come on," Naruto said, once they were finished eating, "let's go watch the night fall." "Sure," Sakura said warmly. It only required a little surge of chakra for ninja of their class to propel themselves to blindingly fast speeds. "How did you find this spot anyway?" Sakura asked once they arrived. They were seated on top of the Hokage monument overlooking the village. "I was pulling a prank one time and hid up here all night," Naruto replied sheepishly. "We've come a long way since then," Sakura said thoughtfully. "I'm finally close to becoming Hokage," Naruto said, his hand going to the necklace Tsunade had given him on a bet once. Sakura smiled. She had already known this from the moment that she found out he had become a Sannin. Whenever possible, Sannin were typically given first choice on the position, and she knew that she didn't want the job. "It's funny really," Sakura said. "I had no ambition to be a Sannin or any such thing, but at some point your dream sort of became mine too." "You want to be Hokage too?" Naruto asked, startled. "No, silly," Sakura said teasingly as she looked away from Naruto into the evening sky. "I want to protect this village and the people who live in it, especially my important people, even if they can usually protect themselves." "I know," Naruto replied, and then changed the subject again. "I forgot how nice it is up here. I could stay all night." "Me too," Sakura agreed. They didn't have to be anywhere they didn't want to be, just another perk of being ranked with the title of Sannin. Well, I don't know precisely why this little story came to mind, but I hope everyone enjoys reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it. Also, keep in mind that the part of the story that falls between the flashback 10 days prior in the timeline of this story is a true flashback, not Tsunade reading Naruto's report, though she got most of the information that was in the flashback since the report told the flashback from Naruto's perspective. Tsunade didn't get any of the Jonin commander's thoughts though, for example. Hopefully it wasn't confusing, especially with the explanation. Thanks for reading and reviewing. If you take the time to do so, it is appreciated. Haruno Sakura found herself feeling particularly young, invigorated, and happy as she walked down the streets of Konoha unencumbered by any responsibility for the day. Except for ghastly visions of green jumpsuits, she might even have compared her attitude to something approaching the endless energy-filled moods Lee or his youthful master guide typically exhibited. Her goal on this morning was the small building that housed the flower business run by her longtime friend Ino. The Yamanaka flower shop seemed locked in a state of suspension in many ways, since it neither grew nor shrank noticeably as a business enterprise. From what Sakura could tell, it was completely unchanged except that the size of its main attendant had gone from chibi to adult. "Why, hello Sakura-sama," Ino said teasingly when Sakura entered the shop. "What brings you down here? Do I really need a reason to come see my best friend Ino-chan?" Sakura asked brightly. "Of course not, especially if you bring some gossip," Ino replied. "Shouldn't I be asking you for gossip?" Sakura said. "I've been out in the field almost constantly, you know. Konoha has been peaceful and quiet," Ino said exasperatedly. "In other words, it's been boring. I want to hear about all those rumors that trickle in from outside the walls from someone with an unlimited security clearance. Special Junin Yamanaka doesn't know something?" Sakura teased. Ino's specialty was, of course, espionage, though most of the time she was utilized for her formidable mental techniques in combat. "Don't make me look around that dusty head of yours," Ino replied, grinning. "It's taken me this long to get over the Chunin exams. I'm afraid that it's a lot less interesting up here than you might think," Sakura said, tapping her forehead with a single finger. "We haven't had a truly challenging mission in quite a while." Ino crinkled up her nose at that. She had developed a greater interest in all things shinobi since achieving Junin status. Possibly as a side effect to her information-gathering techniques, Ino had become eager to hear the details of ninja missions in general and of her friend's exploits as a Sannin in particular. "Fine. Don't tell me anything," Ino said, giving a mock pout. "I guess I could close up the shop for a while so that we could go shopping, for old time's sake." "Still the same Ino," Sakura said, laughing. "Still the same Sakura," Ino echoed a few minutes later. They had stopped in a small clothing boutique that the pair had often frequented as young girls. "What are you talking about?" Sakura asked indignantly. "This would be very flattering. You may have gotten a slight edge on me in ninjutsu, but I'm afraid you're hopelessly behind when it comes to being a woman," Ino replied cheekily. She snatched the casual dress from Sakura's hands and switched it with another smaller garment. "I can't wear that," Sakura said. The cut on the dress was entirely too low and short in all the wrong places to suit her. "When would I wear that? I suppose you might need to lose a few pounds first," Ino said. "What was that, Ino pig?" Sakura asked, fist clenched as her old childhood habit reasserted itself. "I'm trying to help you out, billboard brow," Ino retorted. "We both know you've only got a one-note fashion sense and that one's flat." Sakura and Ino spent the next 10 minutes yelling at each other before parting in a huff, but inwardly both of them felt that old sense of closeness renewing itself as a result of what amounted to a ritual of their friendship. Sakura looked off toward the large central building that housed the Hokage's office and decided that it was probably about time for her to head over. Naruto should already be there discussing some village matter with the advisors, or else sitting around with Jiraiya pretending to work. "Hello Sakura-chan," a soft voice called out from behind her as she turned down one of the main streets. Sakura whirled around with surprise that she hadn't noticed the presence of the person before they called out to her. "Hinata-chan," Sakura replied in greeting. "How have you been?" "I have been well, thank you for asking," Hinata said cheerfully. "It's been so long since I had time to just take a walk," I'm glad we had a chance to meet again outside of business. Sakura nodded, idly chatting with the Hyuga head as they walked slowly toward the Hokage's office complex. Hinata's father had begun to wane in health and power during the last few years, and as a result the shy Hinata had gradually taken over the clan. Her beauty combined with her efforts in remaking the clan in her own image had been so shocking as to earn her the name, Iron Rose, amongst some of Konoha's denizens. Now that she was almost completely in control of the Hyuga, it was rumored that she had abolished the caged bird seal, but no one really knew for sure since the seal couldn't be removed from those who already possessed one. So, how is Naruto-kun? Hinata asked. Sakura's mind was abruptly dislodged from her mental assessment of Hinata's accomplishments by that question. Ah, he's the same as ever, you know him, Sakura said, tacking on a small laugh at the end. He's been occupying himself with seals and the fringe arts. Then he is still hunting for him, Hinata said. We both are, Sakura added. Naruto will never give up against something he sees as such an injustice. I expected that from the person I admire most, Hinata said, smiling slightly at Sakura. It's good to know he hasn't changed. Sakura looked at her, unsure of what to say, but before she was forced to respond, Hinata continued of her own accord. I remember watching Naruto-kun struggle against his fate when we were young, she said. I thought maybe if he didn't give up that I shouldn't either, you know. I promised myself that I would undo my great injustice like he works to undo his. Sakura stole a quick glance at the lavender-haired young woman walking along beside her and felt a great deal of respect for her mixed with a little envy. Hinata had grown into the one of the most beautiful kunoichi in Konoha, and her deadliness in combat was surprising considering her weak beginnings, though in terms of sheer power Sakura exceeded her handedly. Of course, Sakura's power was almost manly in its style that emphasized brute force, while Hinata's gentle fist techniques were something of art. Sakura quickly crossed her arms over her chest and banished such pointless thoughts. I'm sorry Sakura-chan, I rambled on for a while there, Hinata said, some of her old shyness emerging slightly. Don't worry about it Hinata-chan, Sakura said brightly. I know Naruto-kun has had an impact on many people's lives, that's why I. Oi! Sakura-ne-chan, someone shouted. For the second time Sakura found herself surprised that she had failed to notice someone's presence. Konohamaru-kun, Sakura said. The grandson of the third had become a rather close acquaintance with her via his connections to Naruto. Moegi and Udon ran up close behind their leader. Konohamaru and Moegi had made it to Chunin status, but Udon was still a genin because he had missed the final part of the exam for some reason Sakura wasn't quite sure of. Say, Ne-chan, do you know where Naruto-sensei is? Konohamaru asked. He was supposed to teach us some taijutsu moves to help us reach Junin faster. Well, I'm actually looking for him right now, Sakura said. This is great though Ne-chan, Moegi said eagerly. Can you show us some techniques too? Hey, yeah, we'll get training from Sannin, Konohamaru said. Sakura smiled at their praise and nodded her head. I guess it couldn't hurt for a while, she said. Together, the five of them made the rest of the short trip to the Hokage's office only to find Tsunade and Naruto standing on the edge of the roof looking down over the village. What are you two doing up there? Sakura yelled. Ah, well, we were looking out over the village to increase our inspiration, Naruto said lamely. Tsunade's left hand dipped behind her back quickly, but not fast enough to prevent Sakura to see what she was holding. Was that sake? The pink-haired girl yelled. Are you two slacking off again? I'll leave this to you Naruto, Tsunade said. What? Wait. Naruto protested as the aging blonde leapt away from the edge of the roof. You need more training in dispute resolution, Tsunade said, her voice trailing off as she disappeared back inside. Still the same Naruto, Hinata said with a chuckle as the whisker-faced young man leapt down into the midst of the little group that had come searching for him. "Hi Sakura-chan," Naruto said happily before acknowledging the presence of everyone else. "Did you forget your promise to train me today?" Konohamaru asked accusingly. No, nothing like that," Naruto said. "I even reserved one of the training grounds and everything." "Then let's hurry up and go already," Sakura said. "You're coming too?" Naruto asked, somewhat surprised. "Of course, they requested that I train them personally, right guys?" Sakura said flippantly. "You told them that you're better than me in taijutsu, didn't you?" Naruto said teasingly. "No, but now that you mention it," Sakura said. She laughed as Naruto went into his competitive mode. "Actually," Hinata interrupted before Naruto could reply, "I wonder which of you is stronger as a ninja." "You're both Sannin, right?" "Of course it's leader sensei," Konohamaru said indignantly. There was no way anyone could defeat Naruto in his eyes. "Nei-chan is probably stronger," Moegi replied as if it were a matter of fact. Even though Naruto-kun has more chakra and techniques, Nei-chan's medical skills can disable them easily. "Just because you can use that stuff against me and Udon doesn't mean that Naruto-sensei would be beaten like that, right boss?" Konohamaru said. Sakura half expected him to brag about himself like he always used to, so his response was somewhat surprising. "Well, I am better at ninjutsu, but Sakura-chan is better at genjutsu," Naruto said. "We're both probably about equal at taijutsu, though our techniques are much different and Sakura-chan has a lot more strength than I do. Anyway, that isn't the point, you three wanted training, didn't you?" Sakura asked. Everyone had been so busy talking they didn't even realize that they had arrived at the training grounds until Sakura began putting on her gloves and Naruto zipped up his jacket so its folds wouldn't get in his way. "Go easy on me, would you, Sakura-chan?" Naruto said as the two of them moved out a little distance from the observers so that their spar would be uninterrupted. "Of course," Sakura replied. "The whole point is for them to be able to follow and analyze our technique." "Hey, Hinata-san, who do you think will win?" Moegi asked. Hinata's pale eyes glanced back and forth between the pair. Sakura was smiling and laughing slightly at something Naruto was saying as they got into their opening stances. "I think they've both already won," she said, smiling at the young Chunin. "Now pay attention. Ninja like the Sannin are rarely so free with their skill. But they aren't doing any," Moegi said, her voice cutting off when Sakura's hands flickered with chakra-enhanced speed. Naruto dodged her first two moves and then began to slowly, almost casually, block Sakura's blows with a speed that seemed far inferior to his pink-haired opponent. "Byakugan," Hinata said softly. The veins around her eyes bulged as she focused in on their battle. "Amazing," Udon said as Naruto leapt back, his feet barely leaving the ground, as he continued to evade Sakura. "He's reading her," Hinata said. "Even without a dujutsu, he's using his chakra reserves to boost his eye's ability to keep up with her movements." Of course, Hinata knew that they were both deliberately slowing down their movements so that their young observers could see how they fought, and she had to admit that it was quite impressive. Through the power of the Byakugan, Hinata could tell that Sakura wasn't pooling nearly as much chakra in her arms as she normally did when utilizing her monstrous strength, but her style still emphasized landing a multitude of blows. This made sense for her because the chakra in her arms didn't expend itself unless she actually hit something, and any hit, regardless of pinpoint accuracy, was sure to do significant damage. Naruto, on the other hand, was nearly the opposite. He relied on a strategy that depended on speed and evasion whilst he waited for the right moment to inflict attrition damage on his opponent. With his huge chakra reserves, he could outlast even the strongest, most skilled opponent, even one more skilled than him, if he managed to keep all other things equal. Regardless, beyond strategy, the specific tactics the two Sannin used was staggeringly diverse and rapidly shifting from one style to the next. Sakura felt sweat begin to break out on her forehead as she concentrated on Naruto's movements. Each swing of his leg, each jabbing blow of his fist, all of them were methodically executed with the design of opening up holes in her defenses. He was also blocking her attacks in ways that were highly unrealistic in a real battle. Normally her superior strength would be shattering bones if they intruded in the path of her fists like he was doing. Even though they were sparring for the benefit of their young friends, Sakura began to feel annoyance creep into the back of her mind as Naruto continued to press her in his demonstration of the various arts. More than that, she was getting frustrated at being unable to work towards a decisive outcome, regardless of the fact that she was merely fighting a spar. With a chakra-enhanced shove, Sakura put a considerable amount of distance between herself and the blonde-haired Sannin. "Naruto-kun, that's enough," Sakura said. "Hey, we want to see some more," Konohamaru said, complainingly. "They've seen enough of those techniques at that beginner's level," Sakura continued, ignoring the third's young grandson. "Now they need to see them at full power so that they can grasp their true potential, don't you think?" "All right," Naruto agreed, not liking what the look in Sakura's eye boded for the prospects of his pain-free existence. "But it's going to be hard for me to fight your full-powered taijutsu without my techniques." "I don't want to hear any complaints from someone with your ambition," Sakura replied as she lunged toward him with superb speed. Naruto dropped into a crouch directly beneath her first punch and then tried to deliver an uppercut in retaliation, but Sakura had already lurched backwards on an impossibly flexible spine. Her leg came up and tried to slam down on Naruto, who dodged it at the last second. Sakura's blow still landed on the ground, however, and Naruto was caught up in the flying debris that erupted from the shattered dirt. Despite the unsteady quaking ground beneath his feet, Naruto shifted his momentum to drive a counterattack to Sakura's torso. His nimble pink-haired opponent was having none of that. She bent backwards to evade his fist and slammed her foot into Naruto's exposed chest, sending him flying through a large tree. The shower of splinters and dirt had not even started settling when a dark blur emerged to engage her at close combat again as if nothing had happened. Sakura pooled chakra in her fists and began delivering short, powerful jabs. Each jab was followed by a swifter attack until her fists began to blur under the speed that her taijutsu style enabled her to perform. Naruto seemed to stumble over the broken ground beneath their feet as Sakura wound up to deliver a full-powered hammer blow to his torso. "You're mine," she thought triumphantly when Naruto's forearms rose to form an impromptu shield between her attack and his vulnerable body. Her fist connected solidly, and for an instant Sakura was worried that the rest of her day would be involved with reattaching his shattered bones. She need not have been concerned. The observers had to brace themselves against the waves of destructive chakra that had swept across the training field from the force of Sakura's blow. The whipping winds from the shockwave thus nearly caused them to miss Naruto's counterattack. Instead of falling away with pulverized bones, he had somehow escaped unharmed and in a perfect position to dive under Sakura's overextended arm. Sakura's mouth opened involuntarily as the wind was pounded from her lungs by a rapid succession of chakra-enhanced blows to her exposed torso. Sakura leapt back quickly, realizing that she couldn't take that kind of punishment for very long without being at a huge disadvantage. She eyed Naruto closely while she healed the damage he had inflicted and realized that his thwarting of her attack had been the result of those funny metal strips that lined his forearms. Having only ever seen him use them to stop bladed weapons, Sakura hadn't considered that they could be charged with chakra to resist blunt force attacks too. "That isn't helpful to them," Sakura chided. "They'll never have enough chakra to use those guards like that, Naruto." They'll never have the precise control necessary to deliver a punch like yours either, Naruto shot back, grinning. Sakura bent her legs and jumped horizontally toward Naruto's position, her arms whipping slightly as she began to execute a hidden medical technique. The purpose of the spar was quickly escaping her mind, replaced by an overriding desire to win. Naruto slapped her open palm away, confused, but then wary when a few of her rapid thrusts began to slip through his defenses. Hey, no fair, you're using a technique, Naruto said. He bounded away, his arms hanging loosely at his side. He had felt this kind of beneath-the-surface damage before when he had been on the mission to recruit Tsunade all those years ago. Sorry Naruto-kun, but that was purely taijutsu, Sakura replied. I didn't use any chakra at all, I just hit the points where your nerves are most exposed and disrupted their control with that pressure. Naruto grimaced as Sakura flitted away with a burst of speed and closed in on his position. His spectacular healing abilities wouldn't allow her damage to stand for long, but he knew that with her strength and knowledge that he might lose even in those few moments before the repairs were complete. He waited until the last second before delivering a kick aimed at Sakura's side. She predictably knocked it away, which had the effect of causing Naruto to spin on the heel of the foot that had remained on the ground. The kick that actually landed on Sakura was therefore charged up with the momentum of her own fearsome strength. The dull thud of impact reverberated across the training field as she was sent flying, but there was no follow-up sound of a crash. Sakura adjusted her trajectory in midair and sprang toward another attack just as Naruto's fist came up to oppose hers. She looks so happy, Hinata remarked. Indeed, she couldn't help but marvel at the joyous expression on the pink-haired Sannin's face as her fist collided with Naruto's and unleashed another shockwave of excess chakra. After trading several high-powered blows, both decided to disengage at the same time, though it appeared to be for different reasons. Your chakra reserves are insane, Naruto, Sakura shouted with frustration. In order to enhance his strength enough to keep up with hers, even for a limited time, Naruto had to be very nearly burning through more power than Sakura had in her entire body. Your control is even more insane, Naruto retorted. His healing powers had fully kicked in, but it was all that they could do to repair the damage that her blows were inflicting despite the amount of chakra he was using to keep up with her taijutsu. It was at this time that he noticed the presence of several other ninja and even some villagers who had appeared to see what the commotion was all about. Naruto-kun, let's hurry up and end this, Sakura said. She had sensed the new arrivals too apparently. What say we start using techniques now? Whatever you want to do, Sakura-chan, Naruto replied. But no summoning, Sakura added warningly. We've already changed the landscape around here enough without that. Fine, I won't summon the frog boss, Naruto replied easily. I don't want to see those little frogs you use either, Sakura said. Sakura-chan, Naruto said, drawing out the chan with a pout. All right, if you insist. As if by silent signal, both ninja began to move their hands with blurring rapidity to complete the necessary seals for whatever techniques they intended to use. At the completion of his series of seals, Naruto bit his thumb in preparation for what he knew would be a necessary defense against Sakura.